Staying with Manchester United, what is the? Well, obviously, I want to ask you about Jadon Sancho's potential exit to Tottenham, but before that, what's the latest with Mason Mount? Because we're hearing the same thing now that 80 million is this asking price that Chelsea are not budging from. Are you hearing anything different?
Well, I don't think that Chelsea's price is 80 million. I think it's more like 70 to 75 million, which might not seem like a big difference. But if you're starting around the 70 million pound mark and then you're negotiating, there's always a possibility that the suitor will get that number down slightly, or will be able to think of something a little bit more creative. I think that when Chelsea hold out for a total package of 70 to 75 million, that doesn't mean that they're demanding it in a guaranteed sense. So maybe some of the add-ons are less gettable, if you like, such as Manchester United winning the Premier League or the Champions League. And this, again, comes back to something I always say. I'm going to bore you to death with this throughout the window. Structure is as important as number. But in essence, Manchester United, as I understand it, would like to bring two in early in the window, regardless of the ownership situation. And if they're to bring in two, we're discounting the Osimhens and the Kanes in terms of the actual budget here. If they're to bring in two others away from that traditional number 9, where a big outlay would be required on one player, then they want to keep that spend around the 100 million mark. So Mount at 70 to 75 million takes up 3/4 of the budget. Mount at 50 million might allow Manchester United to try for a Højlund, which could be a young option, as far as strengthening the front line, or alternatively somebody like Kim at the back, who has a release clause that's only active for the first 2 weeks of the transfer window. So Manchester United want Mount for under 60 million, and sources increasingly are saying closer, if they can, to 50 million. And if the number stays this high, Manchester United will walk away. So we've got three aspects here. One is Chelsea still want to keep Mount, but there is pessimism. There's a high probability he'll leave. Two is if Chelsea move into selling mode because they realize that Mount is not going to sign with them and they don't want the contract to run down, are they going to come down on the number? And then three is from Manchester United's perspective, because of financial fair play and to a lesser extent the ownership uncertainty, but financial fair play is the big one. Are they going to bend at their end and get closer to Chelsea's valuation? Because if they stick to their guns and around 50 million, then it's going to be quite a tricky deal to negotiate. So this is really going to come down to club negotiation. And as far as I'm aware, at the time we're recording this, they haven't actually placed a formal offer yet. So there's a lot of sounding out, and there's a fair amount of Manchester United approaching the player side, and they believe that they've got buy-in, which is why Manchester United are favourites ahead of, say, Liverpool and Arsenal. Mount is leaning towards Manchester United, but there's a long way to go in terms of the actual club-to-club negotiations, because Manchester United are not going to be paying 70, 75 million for Mason Mount. They're looking for under 60 million. And they're not only doing that because they believe that that's where the value is, because Mount's contract is running down. They're doing that because collectively they want to try and bring in two early in the window. And if Mount eats up too much of that budget, they might miss out on another target.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. And that's kind of echoed what a number of the reports we've seen have said. And I think Man United fans are really concerned about the price becoming, too high for an individual like him. In terms of Jadon Sancho, there's been a lot of speculation that he may be on his way out of Manchester United, PSG linked to him, but also Tottenham. And reportedly the deal with Tottenham is one that's, there's real, genuine, bona fide interest in him and a potential exit. What's your understanding of that situation, Ben?
Well, Erik ten Hag still really likes the player. That's the first thing to say. So I certainly wouldn't say that Sancho is top of the list in terms of outgoings. There's other players that need resolving first. Harry Maguire, for example, is going to be one of them. And there's a lot of speculation about David De Gea as well, and whether the current number one at Manchester United stays or goes. Manchester United are looking for a number one. They need a succession plan. So the Tottenham interest is real in the sense that they like the player. It's the same for PSG, and also Napoli have sent scouts to watch him as well. There's nothing advanced at this point. There's a lot of agent talk. There's a lot of speculation. So Tottenham would be keen on exploring that deal, but there's high wages and there's also going to be a high price if Manchester United are persuaded to sell. I would say people are speaking in the media about 45 or 50 million. I think it might even be as high as 60 million particularly, but 50 plus million is maybe an accurate starting point. But first of all, Manchester United need to decide whether he's surplus to requirements. And I think because of the age and the profile, Erik ten Hag still thinks that there's a role to play there. So we have to wait a little bit and see when the dust settles on this one. First of all, what Erik ten Hag wants to do with the player. That's the most important thing. It's the same with Maguire. He'll have a meeting to determine whether or not they're going to move forwards with Maguire. And I think Erik ten Hag will inform Maguire first and foremost that he's dropping down the pecking order. We've known that anyway from last season. And then Maguire will have to ultimately understand a role in the team, both on and off the field, or decide to leave. And Manchester United are clearly open to selling Maguire at the right price. A lot will just come down to Harry Maguire and whether he's prepared to continue this increasingly diminished role in the team, especially in relation not just to playing time, but also he'll want to maintain his place within the England setup as well. So he's quite a likely exit finally, even though every single window we've heard Maguire rumours and he's not actually gone anywhere. I think this is the summer where Maguire may say, okay, I need to get game time somewhere. So that one, I think, has credence to it. With Sancho, I think that Ten Hag is going to dictate the entire situation. And every club under the sun, including Tottenham, can be very interested in the player. But first and foremost, Erik ten Hag has to decide whether he is or isn't surplus to requirements.
Yeah. And for me, I look at it this way. I think it all depends upon our takeover. And I mean that from the point of view of what budgets are available and who can Manchester United sign to replace him. If there's a better alternative, then of course you may let Sancho go. But if you can't bring him better, it becomes an obsolete action to remove him, because you're getting rid of Sancho and you're bringing somebody that's substandard in comparison. That's a bad move. So depending upon this takeover for United, the budget we have, and who else is available in the market, that's really going to that feels to me like it will dictate this potential exit. As bad as Sancho has been in the last 2 years, or inconsistent as he has been, as you've stated, the Maguires of this world, McTominays of this world, there's far more pressing exits away from this club than Jadon Sancho, I think. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, very, very interesting indeed to see what happens in that space. There's also talk of Paris Saint-Germain looking at him, but we obviously know that Paris Saint-Germain have got a lot of issues, should I say, at the moment. Could you see them coming in for him, or would that only be if the likes of Neymar and Mbappe leave this summer?
I think there's a very realistic chance that Neymar leaves. If PSG can sell him, they will do so. They'll be delighted if they can get a fee for Neymar, so he can be considered a player on the market and very available for an exit from the Parc des Princes. I think with Sancho, he fits PSG's billing, which is buy young. And then the other thing to understand about PSG is trying to move away from star power and high wages. And this is maybe where they have to understand the player and his demands. So there's nothing concrete at this point. I think it's very normal for clubs to register an interest. It's very normal for clubs to scout players at this stage, especially if they think they might be available. And you don't just do that because you want to sign a player. You do that also because you want a yardstick as well. So you might notice that Manchester United have crept into the conversation around James Maddison, who's been traditionally linked with both Newcastle and also Tottenham Hotspur as well. And suddenly Manchester United are just creeping into the conversation, even though there's nothing massive there. And why is that? It's because Maddison's available for 35, 40 million, maximum 45 million, whereas Mason Mount is 70 to 75 million. So you can use an option that effectively is leverage or an alternative. And if Chelsea realise that Maddison is being sold for 40 million and they're asking for 75 million, suddenly it's a no-brainer. If you genuinely, as a potential suitor, think that they're relatively similar in terms of what you need, to go for the significantly cheaper one and maybe use that to help drive the price down. So this is where the games of the market take place. You spend as much time actually chasing a legitimate target as doing due diligence on your rivals and other targets, because you have to understand the value in the market and also the movement that's there. So PSG certainly are looking at these type of players. There's nothing more advanced than that. There's no contact with Manchester United. We know, for example, PSG historically have also looked at Rashford as well. The feeling is under the Glazers or any new owners that a new deal will be thrashed out there. Manchester United don't feel that Rashford will leave. Even PSG never felt it when Nasser Al-Khelaifi met with the Rashford entourage. But again, they still took that meeting because they wanted to know the lay of the land. And there's a lot of that type of thing. There's a lot of these forms of meetings that tend to take place now at this stage, because ultimately you're bracing yourself for the window opening and it's a long summer.